Okay, welcome to today's lecture. Today we're going to talk about a new kind of new theories of economic development, and these new theories are going to emphasize kind of a different aspect of what we have been focusing so far. Okay, so the idea is to move beyond the theories that we have focused so far, which essentially involve capital or some kind of human capital or some form of accumulation. But what these new theories are going to think about is that thinking about this is not enough. We need to think about what are the incentives. Okay, this is not enough. We must think about economic incentives to accumulate these resources. Okay, and when we think about incentive, we will see there is some sort of kind of general pattern that we find that this incentive may lead to what we call poverty traps. And the poverty traps, they're going to take the form of specific form, which comes kind of like the general idea is that in a lot of this accumulation of these resources, there tends to be what we call strategic complementarities. What is strategic complementarity? Strategic complementarity simply means strategic complementarity simply means that the more others in the society do something, the more you want to do it. For example, the more others do something, the more you want to do it. So an example of this increases your incentive to increase your action, increase your incentive to also take that action. And that action could be, for example, how much to invest in a certain, how much to invest in human capital, or how much to invest in physical capital, and so on. And so the idea here, for example, we could think of in terms of investment. So a few examples here could be investment. So the more others invest, the more you have an incentive to invest. Okay. Another example with this, which is not so related to economics, but just to give an idea what strategic complementarities means, we can think about doping in sports. And so if you're, let's say there's no anti-doping controls, the more other people are doping, the more you have an incentive to do doping, even though that may be bad for you. And this may lead you to a bad equilibrium where everybody ends up doing doping. And so what you see here immediately is going to be the key insight that all of these theories, the new type of theories that we're going to focus on, is that when you have this type of strategic complementarities, you could have here, for example, one outcome, one equilibrium of this, where everybody does high amounts of doping. And this is an equilibrium because if everybody else is doing doping, the best you can do is also do doping. But there's also an equilibrium where there's no doping. Nobody does doping. Given that nobody else is doing it, is more likely that you will be caught if you do it now. In the case of doping, this may not be an equilibrium because even if everybody else is not doping, you must still have an incentive to do doping, and that's why, so this becomes an equilibrium, we must add anti-doping controls, otherwise this will not be an equilibrium, and that's the role of anti-doping controls, okay? But we will see there's a general kind of feature here, which is that in situation with strategic complementarities, there are multiple equilibria. There are multiple equilibria. some equilibria are better than others. So multiple equilibria just means self-sustaining situations where given, what is an equilibrium is that a situation where given others, by others we mean this in a vague way, other people in the economy, other relevant agents, others' behavior, equilibrium behavior. So given others' equilibrium behavior, I don't have an incentive. I don't have an incentive means that there's no other action I can take that will increase my payoff. The kind of incentive to change my equilibrium action. Okay, so this is a situation, and so we may be, when there are multiple equilibria, the bottom line is that some equilibria may be good, some may be bad, and so we may be stuck in a bad equilibrium. Okay? And so this leads to the explanation of poverty that there might be good and bad equilibria. Bad equilibria, and one explanation for poverty then the country is poor. So this is an incentive-based explanation because it's stuck in a bad equilibrium. What does it mean? It means it's in a situation where there are no incentives to change the behavior individually. It requires many people to change their behavior simultaneously because it is stuck in a bad equilibrium. What does this mean? It means that the only way for the economy to get out of poverty, so what this means, no individual would have incentive to change their actions. And so the only way the economy can move from a bad equilibrium to a good equilibrium and get out of poverty and develop, so this explains why the development process is hard. Move to good equilibrium requires not one person, but requires the coordination of many agents. Many people need to change their behavior simultaneously. It requires coordination. And so this leads to a different kind of view from what we have been discussing, which is that poverty trap as a coordination failure. Meaning if everybody in the economy could decide that they would change their behavior, then we could get the economy out of poverty. Okay, so let me show you a simple example of what this means, and then we're going to do two models, or at least one model that will exemplify this behavior. And so let's suppose that we have a situation where there are strategic complements in investment, which means your optimal level of investment depends on what other people are going to invest. If everybody else invests a high amount of the money, then you also want to invest a lot. If people invest a little bit, then you want to invest a little bit. And so let's suppose that we have a situation where we have here is your individual investment level. This is your personal investment level. Your optimal choice of investment, so let's call this I sub I, as a function, sometimes we call this best response function of the expected level of inflation of, expected investment. So this is how much you expect everybody else to invest So we're thinking about a symmetric situation. So let's call this the expected level of investment by everybody other than you. So let's call this sub minus I. This is the expected level of investment by everybody other than you. And so let's suppose that we have a situation where your optimal level of investment is a function of what others invest, looks something like this. So when you expect other people to have a low level of investment, for example, the economy has not invested in infrastructure, there are no roads, there are no airports, then you're not going to invest in fancy machines for your business because you're not going to have all the other relevant infrastructure to take a high return on that investment. On the other hand, if everybody else in the economy has a high amount of investment, there are roads, everybody uses computers, everybody uses electronic payments and so on, then that means the return of you making investment is higher and you would like to make a higher level of investment. Now, what we can see here, so let me change the color, is that if we think of a symmetric situation, I apologize, I have come late. If we add here the 45-degree line, so where your investment level is equal to what everybody else is investing, this is a situation, this would be, this red line is the 45-degree line, okay? 45-degree line. Then we can see here an equilibrium in this situation. If you assume symmetry, everybody is the same here, is when you invest what everybody else is investing. And so you can see here we have 3 equilibria, okay? This is a bad equilibrium with low investment, where people have a low amount of investment, YL. This is some kind of medium equilibrium. So here we have economies that are stuck in poverty. They're not investing. Why are they not investing? Because no individual has an incentive to invest. What would it take to move to a high investment equilibrium? This is the good equilibrium here. Good equilibrium, where there is a high level of investment. And when there is a high level of investment, there's a high level of economic growth. How can we move the economy from here to here? It will require coordination. Not one individual can change their behavior. Not one individual has an incentive to change their level of investment. It will require everybody in the economy to change their investment level simultaneously. And that's why when you're stuck in the bad equilibrium, in the low level investment equilibrium, then you're stuck there because there is a coordination failure. You could notice there's no reason in this economy. You could have 2 exactly identical economies, that one is poor and the other one is rich. The only difference is that this economy is stuck is that everybody's kind of coordinating around a bad outcome. You would want everybody to coordinate around a good outcome, but that would require everybody in the society to change their behavior simultaneously, and this would require a lot of coordination in their behavior. And so you're talking about equilibrium due to a coordination failure. And so this is a new way of thinking about economic development and thinking about why economies may not have the incentive and economies may be stuck due to the coordination failure in a poverty trap. This has not to do with economies not having access to technology, not having the possibility. They know they could investigate here, but nobody has the incentive to do so. And so poverty trap essentially means there's lack of economic incentives. Okay. There are lots of simple situations that you can think of. For example, like we discussed some during the lecture, punctuality is another example of this. So a few other simple examples is punctuality. If you think everybody is going to show up late, then you also want to show up late. So there's 2 equilibrium where everybody shows up late. And another equilibrium is everybody in society arrives on time. Then you also want to be punctual. Otherwise, there is a high social cost from you being the only one late. But given that everybody else is late, even if you want to be punctual, if you show up there, the meeting will not start until everybody arrives. You also will be late. And so this will be a bad equilibrium. This will be the good equilibrium from the point of view that when everybody is late, there's a lot of resources wasted. And so This may be, the case of South American countries, maybe this is the case of Nordic countries. The countries are the same, it's just that the countries are stuck in a valley. Okay. So these kind of the general ideas. I want to kind of finish the lecture here just as a general introduction. In class, we discuss other examples like corruption. You can think of it, sorry for the double O, corruption is another example. Or we talk also about some examples that don't involve good or bad equilibrium, just to introduce the idea of multiple equilibrium, like traffic. So in traffic, you have multiple equilibria because traffic is essentially, you need to coordinate the behavior. So you can use traffic lights to decide when to cross an intersection, and you could have two equilibria, one when you cross on a green light, another one when you decide to cross the street on a red light. Notice and think about why both of these are equilibria. Also, another example of traffic that has multiple equilibria is on which side of the road you drive. Okay, so you could have an equilibrium where everybody drives on the right. Given that everybody else drives on the right, you don't have an incentive to change your behavior and drive on the left, or you get into an accident. So which side of the road also has two equilibria. As you can see, one, if you go to the UK or Australia or other places, people are actually on a different equilibrium where everybody drives on the left versus US, Canada, and so on and so forth, but everybody drives on the right. And so this is just two different equilibria. Here, it's not that one is better than the other, so it doesn't really matter. It's just a way of coordinating behavior. But imagine what it would take to think about this idea of coordination failure to get everybody in the US to switch to the British system. It would require everybody to change their action at the same time, or there will be a lot of accidents. And that's why UK and Australia stay in a different equilibrium than the US and Canada. Imagine what it would take to switch from everybody crossing the street with a green light to everybody crossing the street with a red light. Once again, it will require a lot of coordination. And since there's no gain in doing that, nobody will switch. In this type of examples where you have corruption or punctuality or investment, and we will see other economic examples, there is an incentive because one equilibrium is bad, one equilibrium is good. If you're stuck in the bad equilibrium, you want to move to the good equilibrium where everybody shows up on time. You want to move to the good equilibrium with high investment level, but unfortunately, it will require everybody to coordinate their behavior. That's very difficult, maybe very costly, and so there is a coordination failure, and you're stuck in a poverty trap in the bad equilibrium. Okay, so let me finish this lecture here as an introduction. This is the general idea. Next lecture is going to be about the big push model, which is a model which is an example of this, where these strategic complementarities are going to come through the demand side, and so the more other sectors invest, that's going to increase the demand for your sector, and that's going to increase your incentive to invest. And so it's going to have a similar flavor to this graph here. The graph is not going to be there, but the ideas will be similar to that. And we'll see there's going to be two equilibrium, one good equilibrium where everybody invests in new technology, another bad equilibrium where nobody invests in new technology and the economy is stuck in a poverty trap. Okay, so that's coming up in the next lecture. Thank you for tuning in.